All right, chapter 19.2. Let's see what how Augustine phrases this according to Marcus Dodds, the translator. But the actual possession of happiness of this life without the hope of what is beyond. So he's talking about this notion that we can have happiness here without thinking about God to come, is but a false happiness and a profound misery.
Yeah.
Profound misery. For the true blessings of the soul are not now enjoyed. So you're not going to have your rest, your leisure, your joy, right? Now, for that is no true wisdom which does not direct all its prudent observations, manly actions, virtuous self-restraint, and just arrangements, to that end in which God shall be all in a secure eternity and perfect peace. So he says, if you try and have just the goods now, you're really not going to have it here because you're going to have misery, and you're certainly not going to have it in, that to come, because it could very well be in hell for all of eternity.
Yeah, I think we really lost that foundation, right? And it's very hard to not be constantly shaken up when you don't have, if your first principles are wrong or your first premises are wrong, your argument is going to go askew. It doesn't matter. It may be, you might be at the very beginning of the error of the argument, and so the trajectory seems to be following very, very closely, right? But two lines, this time goes on for a long time, and two lines that seem to be traveling very, very closely together for a long period of time will eventually separate into, and never be remotely close to each other again. And so we have to really make sure that, any good builder knows that, if you are off on the foundation, you're going to be off on the roof. The roof will not work. So, and there is why it should seem so obvious that the parent is the primary educator, because the child is laid immediately upon birth into the arms of her mother, who then introduces the child to the father. And that child is generally, right, historically, we have to remember that all this concept of the past of 1900 through 2000 was a great human experiment, right? We're finally the children of the experimentation of the Enlightenment, right? We finally get to be that. We're finally, like, the Enlightenment was able to follow Christianity for so long, right? But suddenly it starts to really diverge. That those two lines start to really, really diverge in the early 1900s and all through that century. And when you think about the concept of the family in even, let's say, 1910, 1920, there really is a deep nostalgia, right? We don't even think that kind of family could exist anymore. And yet that's the normative family for the centuries that preceded it. This disaster and this destruction of the nuclear family now is the only thing that gives credence to the belief that the state could actually be the arbiter of rights and the arbiter of education. Because if the family were sound, that would be obvious that that's not reasonable, right? It would just be obvious. Somebody was saying the other day that, the despotic, right? The despotic King Louis XIV, who never really said the line "L'état c'est moi," right? The state is me, right? I'm the state. He'd be salivating at the immense amount of powers that our democratically elected presidents have. He had nothing remotely close to the power that these men assume for themselves.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So Augustine will talk about a quick measure for all three parts of society, family, civil, and spiritual, is to observe what they love.
Right.
A people is an assembly. So this is, I guess we're still maybe in 19.2. Darn it. I have the page number, not the paragraph. A people is an assemblage of reasonable beings bound together by a common agreement as to the object of their love. Then, in order to discover the character of any people, we have only to observe what they love. It will be called a superior people in proportion as it is bound together by higher interests, and inferior in proportion as it is bound by lower.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting too, like just doing a casual, like scan of quote unquote public buildings, right? Up until probably 1930, when you start having the monstrosities and the high rises being built, right? In almost every city across the world, the most important building was the church, right? Set on a hill. The steeple was generally big enough that you would be able to hear it. In most areas, there would have been church bells ringing. And how rapidly in this past century did we see the demise of the religious to the secular? Because now when you go into a city, the buildings that you see are either commerce or sports related, right? We build temples to money, and we build temples to demigods, right? There's really no difference in regards to, let's say, the Acropolis in Rome, in Greece, that was built to Apollo, than there is the football stadium that's built to the demigods of football. But even now, like in the past, 5 years, 4 years, we've really seen the false face of these gods, and people are not happy with who they're worshiping anymore, because the people who they're worshiping, right, the demigods, the money, the bankers, the lenders, everybody, the sports gurus, whomever, are now beginning to preach to them and ask them things that they did not intend to give when they started the worship. And that's the way demonic worship always is, right? It's always very pleasant and joyful at the beginning, and then you find yourself in chains at the end. So that point about, you can know a society by what it loves. There is anybody who wants to study the demographics of our culture in the century that preceded us can see that we went from loving the Lord to loving money and loving demigods. I mean, I don't know what else to call sports figures or idols, athletes, musicians, whatever. I mean, we're worshiping people.
That's right. That's right. God has divided the government of the human race between two authorities, ecclesiastical and civil. Again, now I'm tracking back to Pius XI here.
Right.
Paragraph 43. Both have their own domain, which is supreme, with fixed boundaries peculiar to their own activities. And he likes this comparison. I think it was a very good one, that can be made to man who has both a body and a soul, which both have their end in heaven. Because, right, as Christians, we believe in the resurrection of the body.
Right.
And the soul's perfected by order of grace. So both, right, again, it's always going to be that end point for the body and for the soul is that union with God. Christ's command, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God, succinctly points these two mains and how to negotiate between the two spheres. The best citizens are upright men and women. An upright person is a synonym for a Christian. Right? I mean, it really, and if Sarah's talking about our past not too long ago, that's when you were to say someone was Christian, it would be considered good, a good person, an upright person. That's not the case now, but that was then. To the extent there is a deficiency, is a rightful concern for all, and another indicator that we live in societies and not as automatons. The best states or civil institutions are those infused with the light of Christ. It is noted in a practical way by where people choose to live. And I had a legislator from a different state. We were having a meeting. And she makes this statement: people vote with their feet if they're able. Many stories, and there are many stories I could sit here and start to tell you about people who are moving from other parts of the country to Texas. because of this less free, less moral problem, right? Morality, the more debaucherous, licentious, the more evil the society becomes. Invariably, the freedoms disappear.
Right, absolutely.
Especially,
Liberty and license cannot reside in the same place at the same time. You know, if you say that you have a right to life and then there's an abortion law to give someone a license to kill the child in the womb, then you have no right for life. If you believe that you have a right to life, but some CIA agent has a license to kill, your right to life is not as concrete as you think it is. And we really have to be cognizant of the fact that these, like you were saying, these people moving from areas where oppression is weighing heavily to areas where they believe that there is a hope to live in authentic freedom. The problem is that we have been trained in our modern education system to see freedom as being doing whatever you want, but that's actually licentiousness, as opposed to true freedom, which is to be able to choose the good.
that's right. That is a good place. We're going to do a restatement in the next episode. Till then, fides, Horatio.